Jake Morrison checked his weapon for the third time that morning. The small device hummed softly in his hand, fully charged and ready. He clipped it back to his belt and straightened his uniform. Today was the biggest assignment of his career, and he couldn't afford any mistakes. The year was 2187, and humanity had finally made contact with aliens. Real aliens, not the kind from old movies. The Viridian Empire had sent representatives to meet with Earth's leaders, and the meeting would happen on a neutral space station called Convergence Point. It floated somewhere between Earth and Viridian space, built specifically for this historic moment. Jake was 32 years old and had spent the last 10 years protecting important people. Diplomats, politicians, scientists. He was good at his job, very good. He could read a room in seconds, spot threats before they became dangerous, and move faster than most people thought possible. But he'd never protected royalty before, and he'd certainly never done it in space. Princess Victoria Hayes stood near the viewing window of their shuttle, watching the space station grow larger as they approached. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple blue dress that somehow looked both formal and practical. Jake had read her file. She was smart, educated in diplomacy and xenobiology, and she'd volunteered for this assignment. Most people would be terrified to meet aliens for the first time. Victoria seemed excited. "It's beautiful," she said, not turning from the window. "Don't you think so, Jake?" Jake moved closer but kept his eyes scanning the shuttle's interior. "Yes, ma'am. Very impressive, and you can call me Victoria. We're going to be spending a lot of time together." "I prefer to keep things professional, ma'am." She smiled at that but didn't argue. Jake appreciated that about her. She understood boundaries. The shuttle docked with Convergence Point 20 minutes later. The station was enormous, a wheel spinning slowly in space to create artificial gravity. Human engineers had worked with Viridian builders to create it, and the result was something that felt both familiar and alien at the same time. Jake stepped out first, his hand near his weapon. The docking bay was clean and well lit, with guards from both species standing at attention. The human guards wore black uniforms like his own. The Viridian guards were something else entirely. They were tall, easily 7 feet, with blue-gray skin that seemed to shimmer under the lights. Their faces were almost human but not quite, with larger eyes and sharper features. They wore armor that looked like it had been grown rather than manufactured, all curves and flowing lines. Each one carried weapons that Jake didn't recognize. One of the Viridian guards stepped forward. "Princess Victoria Hayes of Earth, we welcome you to Convergence Point. Please follow me to the ceremony hall." Victoria nodded gracefully and moved forward. Jake stayed close to her right side, his eyes constantly moving. The station's corridors were wide and clean, with windows showing the stars beyond. They passed more guards, more officials, more aliens. Jake cataloged each one, noting positions and potential threats. The ceremony hall was massive, easily the size of a football field. Hundreds of beings filled the space, human and Viridian alike. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat the Viridian delegation. And in the center, in a chair that could only be called a throne, sat Queen Zarathi. Jake had seen pictures, but they hadn't prepared him for the real thing. She was tall like the others, but held herself differently. There was power in the way she sat, in the way her eyes swept across the room. Her skin was darker than the other Viridians, a deep blue-gray that seemed to absorb light. She wore robes of silver and white that flowed around her like water. A crown of crystal sat on her head, catching the light and throwing rainbows across her face. For just a moment, the Queen's eyes met Jake's. He felt something strange pass between them, something he couldn't name. Then she looked away and the moment was gone. The ceremony began. Speeches were made in both languages, translated by machines that whispered in everyone's ears. Victoria spoke beautifully about peace and cooperation, and the future of both species. The Viridian Chancellor responded with similar words. Everything was going perfectly, too perfectly. Jake's instincts started screaming at him. Something was wrong. He scanned the crowd again, looking for anything out of place. There, near one of the side entrances, 3 Viridians were moving with purpose. They wore civilian clothes, but Jake recognized the way they moved. He'd seen it 1,000 times before. These were soldiers trying to look like civilians. He leaned close to Victoria. "Ma'am, we need to move, now." "Jake, what?" "The explosion cut her off." One of the side walls erupted in fire and smoke. Screams filled the hall as people scattered in every direction, More explosions followed and then weapons fire. The 3 Viridians Jake had spotted pulled out guns and started shooting at the royal platform. Jake didn't think. He grabbed Victoria and threw her to the ground, covering her body with his own. Debris rained down around them. He could hear more weapons firing, guards shouting orders, people screaming in pain and fear. "Stay down," he yelled at Victoria. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear but not panicking. Good. Panic got people killed. Jake drew his weapon and fired at the nearest attacker. The man went down. 2 more appeared from the smoke, their weapons aimed at the crowd. Jake fired again, hitting one in the shoulder. The other turned toward him and Jake rolled to the side, pulling Victoria with him. Shots burned the floor where they'd been lying a second before. The station's emergency systems kicked in. Barriers dropped from the ceiling, dividing the hall into sections. Emergency lights turned everything red. Jake could see Viridian guards fighting the attackers, but there were more attackers than he'd initially thought. This was coordinated. This was planned. He needed to get Victoria out of here. "Can you run?" he asked her. "Yes, then we run. Stay behind me. Don't stop for anything." They moved fast, staying low. Jake shot 2 more attackers as they ran, clearing a path to the nearest exit. Behind them, he could hear heavier weapons firing. The royal guards were protecting Queen Zarathi, forming a wall of armored bodies around her. Jake and Victoria were almost to the exit when he saw movement from the corner of his eye. An attacker, wounded but still armed, was aiming at the queen. The guards hadn't seen him. In 1 second, maybe 2, he would fire. The queen would die. Jake made a choice. He changed direction, sprinting toward the attacker. The man saw him coming and turned his weapon. Jake was faster. He tackled the attacker and they went down hard. The weapon discharged, the shot going wild. They struggled, fighting for control of the gun. Pain exploded in Jake's side. The attacker had a knife. Jake ignored it. He couldn't stop now. With his free hand, he struck the attacker's throat once, twice, 3 times. The man went limp. Jake stood, swaying. His side was wet with blood. He looked up and saw Queen Zarathi standing on the platform, her guards around her. She was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Then the world started spinning. Jake fell to his knees. Victoria was there, her hands trying to stop the bleeding. Viridian guards rushed forward. Someone was shouting orders. Jake tried to stay conscious, but darkness was pulling at him. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the Queen's face, still watching him, her eyes filled with something that looked almost like wonder. Jake woke up slowly, fighting his way through darkness and confusion. His body felt strange, like it wasn't quite his own. There was no pain, which seemed wrong. He remembered the knife, the blood, the feeling of his life pouring out onto the floor. He should be dead or at least hurting badly. He opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was white and smooth, glowing with soft light. This wasn't a human hospital. The walls curved in ways that Earth architecture never did, and the air smelled different. Sweet, almost floral, with a hint of something metallic. "You're awake." The voice came from his left. Jake turned his head carefully and saw a Viridian standing beside his bed. She wore robes that marked her as a medical professional, and her hands held a device that displayed information Jake couldn't read. "Where am I?" His voice came out rough and dry. "The Royal Medical Facility aboard the Sovereign Dawn. You've been unconscious for 3 days. How do you feel?" Jake sat up slowly, expecting pain. None came. He looked down at his side where the knife had gone in. Smooth skin, not even a scar. "What did you do to me?" "We healed you. Our medical technology is quite advanced compared to your people's methods. You're completely recovered." Jake swung his legs off the bed and stood. His muscles worked perfectly, no weakness, no dizziness. It was like the attack had never happened. "I need to see Princess Victoria. I need to know if she's safe. The princess returned to Earth 2 days ago. She's perfectly safe, thanks to you." The doctor tapped her device. "You have a visitor waiting outside. She's been very patient, but I suspect she won't wait much longer. Are you ready to receive her?" "Who?" The doctor smiled, showing teeth that were slightly sharper than human teeth. "Queen Zarathi herself." Before Jake could respond, the door opened. It didn't slide like doors on Earth stations. It simply melted away, the material flowing into the walls. Queen Zarathi stepped through, and the door reformed behind her. She was even more impressive up close without the chaos of an attack. She moved like water, graceful and powerful at the same time. Her eyes, a deep violet color, fixed on Jake with an intensity that made him want to step back. He didn't. He'd face down armed attackers. He could handle one alien queen no matter how intimidating she was. "Leave us," Zarathi said to the doctor. The doctor bowed and left quickly. Jake stood at attention, falling back on military training. "Your Majesty, you saved my life," Zarathi said. Her voice was lower than he expected, with a musical quality to it. "You were protecting your princess, yet you abandoned your duty to save me. Why?" Jake thought about his answer carefully. "I made a tactical decision. The princess was near safety. You were in immediate danger. I acted to prevent the greater loss. A tactical decision." The queen moved closer, circling him slowly. Jake forced himself to stand still. "Tell me, Jake Morrison, do you always make tactical decisions in less than a second, or was this something more?" "I was doing my job, Your Majesty. Your job was to protect Princess Victoria. Your job was not to sacrifice yourself for an alien ruler you'd never met." She stopped directly in front of him. "I've been studying humans since you arrived in this sector of space. You're fascinating. So weak physically, such short lives, and yet you accomplish impossible things. Do you know what I find most interesting about your species?" "No, Your Majesty." "Your capacity for selfless action. Viridians understand duty and honor. We value strength and courage. But humans have something else. You'll die for complete strangers. Not because duty demands it, but because something inside you says it's right." She paused. "I want that quality in my service." Jake felt cold despite the warm air. "I'm honored, Your Majesty, but I work for Earth's Diplomatic Protection Service. My duty is to my people and my planet." "Yes, about that." Zarathi produced a small device and tapped it. A holographic display appeared in the air between them. Jake recognized it as an official Earth government document. "Your leaders and I have come to an agreement. As a gesture of goodwill and to strengthen the alliance between our peoples, you will serve as my personal guardian for a period of 5 Earth years." Jake stared at the document. It had signatures from Earth's president, the Secretary of Defense, and half a dozen other officials. They'd sold him. They'd literally traded him away like a piece of equipment. This is illegal. You can't just assign someone without their consent. Read Section 7, Paragraph 3. In cases of interplanetary diplomatic necessity, security personnel can be reassigned for the greater good. You signed that agreement when you joined the Diplomatic Protection Service. Zarathi dismissed the hologram. "I'm not asking for your permission, Jake Morrison. I'm informing you of your new assignment." Jake wanted to argue, to refuse to do something, but he knew the law. He'd signed the papers. He'd agreed to serve wherever needed. He just never thought it would be like this. "When do I start?" "Immediately." Zarathi gestured to the door. "Come, I'll show you to your quarters, and then we'll begin your training." The Sovereign Dawn was enormous, more like a flying city than a ship. Zarathi led him through corridors filled with Viridians going about their business. Everyone they passed stopped and bowed to the Queen. Many stared at Jake with open curiosity or hostility. He couldn't blame them. He was an alien in their world, an outsider who'd somehow ended up close to their most important leader. His quarters were larger than his apartment back on Earth. The main room had furniture that adjusted to his size when he approached it. A window showing the stars and doors leading to what looked like a bedroom and bathroom. Everything was functional but beautiful in a way human design never achieved. It looked grown rather than built. "You'll have 1 hour to rest and explore your quarters," Zarathi said. "Then Commander Kyle will come to begin your training. He's the head of my personal guard. He's not pleased about your presence here, but he'll teach you what you need to know." "Why me?" Jake asked. "There are better fighters, more experienced guards. Why specifically choose me?" Zarathi turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Because I watched you make an impossible choice in an instant. Because you valued life over duty. Because you're human and humans think differently than we do. That difference might save my life again someday." She looked back at him. "And because I want to understand what drives a being to sacrifice himself for a stranger." Then she was gone and Jake was alone. He spent the hour exploring his new home. The bathroom had a cleaning system that used sound waves instead of water. The bedroom's mattress adjusted to his body shape automatically. The window could display views of different planets and stars with a touch. It was all impressive and all completely alien. When Commander Kale arrived, Jake understood why Zarathi had warned him. The Viridian was huge, even by his species' standards, easily 7.5 feet tall and built like a tank. His armor was more elaborate than the regular guards, marked with symbols that probably indicated rank. His face was scarred and his eyes were cold. "Human," Kyle said, making the word sound like an insult. "Follow me." They walked in silence to a training facility. It was massive, with areas for combat practice, weapons training, and physical conditioning. Other guards were working out, and all of them stopped to watch as Jake entered. "You'll train for 6 hours every day," Kyle said. 3 hours of physical conditioning, 2 hours of combat, 1 hour of cultural education. You're weak, slow, and ignorant. My job is to make you less of a liability. "I've been trained," Jake said quietly. "I can handle myself. Against humans, perhaps. Against Viridians, you're a child." Kale gestured to a training mat. "Prove me wrong." Jake knew this was a test. Refuse and he'd look weak. Accept and he'd probably get destroyed. But he'd never backed down from a fight in his life. He stepped onto the mat. Kale moved faster than anything that size should move. 1 second he was 5 feet away. The next, Jake was on his back with Kale's hand around his throat. Not choking him, just holding him there. Demonstrating superiority. "Weak," Kale said, releasing him. "But that can be improved. Slow. That can be trained. What can't be trained is heart and courage." He offered Jake a hand and pulled him to his feet. "The Queen says you have both. I'll believe it when I see it." Training was brutal. Kale pushed Jake to his limits and then passed them. The other guards watched, some with amusement, some with curiosity. Jake fell, got up, fell again. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned, but he didn't quit. 5 hours later, covered in sweat and barely able to stand, Jake finished his first day of training. "You survived," Kale said. It wasn't quite approval, but it wasn't contempt either. "Tomorrow will be harder." Jake limped back to his quarters, showered, and collapsed onto his bed. His body hurt everywhere. His pride hurt worse. He'd been one of Earth's best guards, and here he was nothing. Less than nothing. But as he drifted off to sleep, he thought about Queen Zarathi's words. 5 years. He could survive 5 years of anything, and maybe, just maybe, he'd learn something worth knowing. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison became a guardian to an alien queen. 6 months of brutal training, cultural lessons, and slowly learning to function in a world that wasn't his own. His body had adapted to the constant physical demands. His mind had absorbed Viridian customs, language, and protocol. He still made mistakes, but fewer now. The other guards had stopped treating him like a joke. He'd earned their respect through persistence and a few well-placed victories in training matches. Even Commander Kale had warmed to him slightly, though the Viridian would never admit it. But the biggest change was in his relationship with Queen Zarathi. At first, their interactions had been formal and brief. She would summon him for guard duty, and he would stand silently while she conducted business. But gradually things shifted. She started asking him questions about Earth, about human history and philosophy. He would answer, and she would listen with genuine interest. Then one evening, after a particularly long diplomatic meeting, she'd invited him to join her for dinner. Just the two of them, no formality, no guards. They'd talked for hours about leadership and the weight of responsibility. Jake had seen past the crown and the power to the person underneath. She was brilliant, compassionate, and incredibly lonely. After that, the dinners became regular. They talked about everything: books, music, the nature of duty, the fear of failure. Jake found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. His doubts about whether he was truly making a difference. His grief over losing teammates in past assignments. His fear that he'd never be good enough. Zarathi shared her own burdens. The political pressures from noble families who wanted more war and conquest. The constant threat of assassination from within her own court. The isolation of being a queen with no equals. No one she could truly trust. "You can trust me," Jake had said one night. She'd smiled sadly. "I know, that's why you're dangerous to me." Jake hadn't understood what she meant. Not then. Now, standing outside the Queen's personal chambers at midnight, he was about to find out Lady Mira, a Viridian scientist and one of the few nobles who genuinely supported Zarathi, had contacted him an hour ago. Her message had been brief and urgent. There was a conspiracy. Duke Theron and several high-ranking military officials were planning to overthrow the Queen. They viewed her alliance with humanity as weakness and wanted to expand the empire through conquest. Jake had evidence now. Data files that Mira had risked her life to copy. Communications between the conspirators. Troop movements that made no strategic sense. financial records showing weapons being stockpiled. It was all there, clear as day. They planned to move during the fleet review next week when the Queen would be exposed and vulnerable. He knocked on the door. A moment later, it melted away. Zarathi stood there in simple robes, her crown set aside. Her hair, usually bound in elaborate styles, fell loose around her shoulders. She looked younger like this, more vulnerable. "Jake, it's late." "Is something wrong?" "We need to talk. Privately." She saw something in his expression that made her step aside immediately. He entered, and the door reformed behind him. Her personal chambers were smaller than he'd expected, almost humble compared to the grand spaces she inhabited publicly. Books lined the walls, real paper books from dozens of worlds. A window showed the stars wheeling slowly past. "Tell me," she said. Jake presented everything. The evidence, Mira's testimony, his own analysis of the conspiracy. Zarathi listened in silence, her face growing harder with each revelation. "Theron," she said finally, "I should have seen this coming. He's opposed every reform I've attempted, every alliance I've forged. But to move against me directly?" She walked to the window, her back to Jake. "How many others are involved?" "At least 20 high-ranking officials. Maybe more. Mira couldn't access all the communications." 20, Zarathi repeated. "Out of a court of 100. That's enough to cause serious problems even if they don't succeed in killing me. We can arrest them now, tonight. Don't give them the chance to move. And split the Empire in civil war." She turned back to him. "Theron has supporters among the military and the outer colonies. If I move against him without absolute proof, without giving him a chance to defend himself publicly, I'll be seen as a tyrant. The very thing I've tried not to become. So what do we do?" Zarathi was quiet for a long moment. "We let them make their move at the fleet review. But we'll be ready. Can you trust Commander Kale with this information?" "I think so. He loves you more than you know." Something flickered in her eyes at those words. "Loves his queen, you mean?" "No," Jake said quietly. "Loves you. The person, not the crown. Like you do?" The question hung in the air between them. Jake had been avoiding this truth for months, but he couldn't anymore. "Yes, like I do." Zarathi crossed the distance between them in 3 steps. She stood close enough that Jake could feel the warmth radiating from her body. Viridians ran hotter than humans, he'd learned. Their hearts beat faster, their blood moved quicker. Everything about them was more intense. "This is forbidden," she said. "A queen cannot have personal attachments. Not to anyone, but especially not to an alien from a species we barely know. My court would use it against me. Theron would use it as proof that I've been compromised." "I know. You're only here for 5 years. Less than that now. You have a life on Earth, a family, a home. This can't work." "I know. Then why?" Her hand came up, touching his face. Her fingers were warm and soft. "Why do you look at me like that? Why do you make me feel things I have no right to feel?" "Because I can't help it," Jake said honestly. "Because somewhere between the training and the dinners and the long conversations, I stopped seeing you as my assignment. I started seeing you as someone I care about. Someone I would do anything to protect, even die. If necessary. You already did that once. I won't let you do it again." She kissed him. It was gentle at first, questioning. Jake answered by pulling her closer. The kiss deepened and the rest of the world fell away. There was only this moment, this impossible connection between 2 beings from different worlds. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back in. "This changes nothing," Zarathi said, but her voice shook. "We still have to deal with Theron. We still have to pretend this never happened. I understand. Do you? If anyone finds out about this, it will destroy everything I've built. The alliance with Earth, the peace I've fought for, all of it. Then no one will find out." Jake stepped back, putting proper distance between them. "We deal with the conspiracy. We save your crown, and then I finish my service and go home." "Just like that?" "Just like that." But they both knew he was lying. The next few days were tense. Jake met with Commander Kale in secret and shared the evidence. The Viridians' reaction was predictable. Rage followed by a cold determination to crush the traitors. Together, they planned the defense. Loyal guards were carefully positioned. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Emergency protocols were established. Lady Mira continued her dangerous work, gathering more evidence and identifying more conspirators. Jake worried about her constantly. If Theron discovered what she was doing, he'd kill her without hesitation. The fleet review arrived. It was a massive display of Viridian military might. with hundreds of ships performing intricate maneuvers in perfect formation. Thousands of nobles, officials, and military officers attended. Zarathi stood on an observation platform, appearing completely calm and confident. Only Jake, standing close to her, could see the tension in her shoulders. Theron was there, dressed in his finest robes, playing the part of loyal duke. He smiled at the queen and complimented her on the impressive display. Jake wanted to hit him. The signal came 2 hours into the review. A minor malfunction in one of the ships, nothing serious, except that it was the code word Mira had warned them about. The conspirators were moving. Theron's soldiers emerged from hidden positions throughout the observation deck. They'd smuggled weapons past security, probably with help from corrupted guards. There were more of them than expected. Jake's heart sank. This was going to be bad. Treachery. Commander Kyle's voice boomed across the deck. The loyal guards formed up instantly, creating a defensive wall around the queen. Theron dropped all pretense. "You've lost, Zarathi. Stand down and I'll let you live in exile. Resist and die here." "I think not," Zarathi said calmly. "You're the one who should surrender, Theron. Your conspiracy is known. Your co-conspirators are being arrested as we speak. You've already lost." Theron's face twisted with rage.
"Kill them all!"
The fighting started. Energy weapons lit up the observation deck. Jake moved on pure instinct, putting himself between Zarathi and the attackers. He'd trained for this, prepared for this, but the reality was chaos. Screams, explosions, the smell of burned flesh and melted metal. Commander Kale fought like a demon, his weapons moving so fast they blurred. The other loyal guards held their ground, refusing to let the traitors through. But there were too many attackers. They were being pushed back. Jake saw an opening. 3 of Theron's soldiers had broken through the defensive line and were heading for a side corridor. If they escaped, they could trigger emergency protocols and lock down the entire ship. The queen would be trapped. "I'm going after them," Jake shouted to Kale. "Too dangerous." "No choice." Jake ran, chasing the fleeing soldiers. He caught the first one in the corridor, taking him down with a shot to the leg. The second turned and fired. Jake felt something burn across his shoulder but ignored it. He returned fire and the soldier fell. The third made it to the control panel. His hands moved across it, trying to activate the lockdown. Jake tackled him and they went down hard. They struggled, fighting for control. The soldier was stronger, but Jake was more desperate. He got his hands around the soldier's weapon and turned it. One shot, the soldier went still. Jake staggered to the control panel and reversed the lockdown sequence. Behind him, he could hear the fighting continuing. He needed to get back to Zarathi. When he returned to the observation deck, it was over. The loyal guards had won, though many were wounded. Theron lay on the ground in restraints, his face bloody and defiant. Zarathi stood over him, her robes torn but her bearing still regal. "Take him away," she ordered. "All the conspirators are to be tried publicly. Let everyone see what happens to traitors." As the guards dragged Theron away, Zarathi's eyes found Jake's. For just a moment, her mask slipped. Relief flooded her face, followed by something deeper, something she quickly hid as others approached. But Jake had seen it, and he understood now what she'd meant about him being dangerous to her. Because in that moment, standing in the aftermath of battle with her crown intact and her throne secure, Queen Zarathi of the Viridian Empire had looked at a human guard like he was the most important thing in the universe. And that was a problem neither of them knew how to solve. The news spread through the Viridian Empire like wildfire. Queen Zarathi and her human guardian. The story grew with each telling. Some versions were romantic. Others were scandalous. All of them were problematic. Jake had tried to keep their relationship secret, but someone had seen them in her chambers that night. Someone else had noticed the way they looked at each other during the battle with Theron's forces. In a court full of ambitious nobles and curious servants, secrets didn't last long. The backlash was immediate and severe. Traditional nobles called for Jake's removal, claiming he was a corrupting influence on their queen. They said humans were inferior beings, unsuitable for any role close to the throne. Military officials questioned his loyalty, suggesting he might be a spy for Earth. Religious leaders declared the relationship unholy, a violation of ancient laws about purity and proper conduct. Zarathi faced it all with her usual strength. She refused to send Jake away, stating firmly that he was a valued member of her guard who had proven his loyalty repeatedly. She attended public events with him at her side, daring anyone to challenge her directly. She gave speeches about the importance of looking beyond species and tradition, but Jake could see what it cost her. The stress showed in small ways. She slept less. She ate less. The light in her eyes dimmed slightly with each new attack from her own people. Then Duke Theron escaped. He'd been held in a maximum security facility awaiting trial, but someone had helped him break free. The same someone, Jake suspected, who had been feeding information to his co-conspirators all along. Theron vanished into the outer colonies, and within days, reports came back of him meeting with the Kryn Collective. The Kryn were bad news. They were a loose alliance of aggressive species who viewed the Viridian Empire as weak and ripe for conquest. They'd been probing the borders for years, testing defenses, looking for opportunities. Theron offering them an alliance was everyone's worst nightmare. "We need to find him," Commander Kale said during a strategy meeting. "Every day he's free, he grows stronger." "The Kryn won't make a move yet," Lady Mira argued. "They'll want to see if Theron can deliver what he promises. Political chaos in the Empire, dissent in the military, a divided populace. Which he can deliver," Zarathi said quietly. "Because of me. Because I've given the traditionalists exactly what they needed. A foreign influence in the royal court. A scandal to rally behind." Everyone in the room understood what she was suggesting without saying it directly. If she ended things with Jake, the scandal would die down. Theron would lose his most powerful weapon. The Empire would stabilize. Jake spoke before anyone else could. "I can return to Earth. My contract is almost up anyway. Another few months and I would have left regardless." "No," Zarathi said immediately. Then more carefully, "Your presence here has nothing to do with the contract anymore. You've proven yourself invaluable. The scandal isn't your fault. It's mine for allowing personal feelings to interfere with my duties." "With respect, Your Majesty," Commander Kale said, "personal feelings are the only thing keeping you human. Or, in your case, keeping you Viridian. The people don't want a perfect ruler. They want someone real. They want someone who follows their traditions," Zarathi countered. "Someone who understands and respects the old ways." "Then perhaps the old ways need to change," Jake said. The meeting continued for hours, debating strategies and responses. But no clear solution emerged. They were trapped between tradition and necessity, between political reality and personal truth. 2 weeks later, the Kryn attacked. They hit 3 border colonies simultaneously, overwhelming the local defenses. The attacks were coordinated and brutal, clearly planned with inside information about Viridian military deployments. Theron's work without doubt. Zarathi mobilized the fleet immediately. She would lead the response personally, a decision that terrified Jake but didn't surprise him. She'd never been a queen who hid behind her guards while her people suffered. "I'm coming with you," Jake told her as she prepared to board the command ship. "Your contract doesn't require you to fight in wars." "My contract expired yesterday. I'm volunteering." She looked at him for a long moment. "You should go home, Jake, back to Earth, back to your family. This isn't your fight." "Everything involving you is my fight." They both knew this was the moment, the decision point. She could order him to stay behind and he would have to obey. She was still his queen in every way that mattered. Instead, she nodded once. "Stay close to me during the battle. Use your human tactics. We need every advantage we can get." The battle was like nothing Jake had ever experienced. Space combat was different from anything on Earth. Ships moved in 3 dimensions, weapons fired across thousands of miles, and strategy required thinking in ways human brains weren't designed for. But Jake's human perspective proved valuable. He saw patterns the Viridian commanders missed, suggested maneuvers that seemed crazy but worked. The Kryn were expecting traditional Viridian tactics. They weren't prepared for human unpredictability. "Focus fire on their supply ships," Jake suggested during the 3rd engagement. "Cut off their ammunition and they'll have to retreat." "That's not how we fight," one admiral protested. "We engage the strongest ships first, prove our superiority." "And that's why you're losing," Jake said bluntly. "War isn't about proving superiority. It's about winning." Zarathi overruled the admiral. They hit the supply ships. 2 hours later, the Kryn fleet retreated, unable to sustain their attack without fresh ammunition. It was the first victory, but not the last battle. The war continued for months, spreading across multiple systems. Jake found himself commanding a unit of Viridian soldiers who'd requested to work under him specifically. They liked his unconventional tactics, his willingness to try new approaches. They called themselves the Hybrid Unit, a mix of Viridian strength and human creativity. Commander Kale joined them after the third major engagement. "You're making the rest of us look bad," he said with what might have been a smile. "Just doing what humans do best," Jake replied, "making things up as we go." The success of Jake's unit spread through the fleet. More soldiers requested transfers. His tactics were studied and adopted. Slowly, the tide of the war turned. The Kryn, expecting an easy conquest, found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow the expected patterns. But victory came at a cost. During a ground assault on a contested colony, Jake's unit was pinned down by Kryn artillery. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Jake made a decision. He led a small team in a flanking maneuver, drawing fire away from the main unit. It worked. The unit broke through and secured the colony. But Jake took a hit from a Kryn weapon, something that burned through armor like paper. He went down hard, his entire left side burning with pain. Commander Kale carried him back to the medical ship personally. "Stay with me, human. The Queen will kill me if you die." "Tell her," Jake managed to say through the pain. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her yourself." Zarathi arrived at the medical ship while Jake was in surgery. She pushed past guards and doctors demanding to see him. They tried to stop her, explaining that he was critical, that she couldn't interfere with the procedure. She didn't care. She stood beside the surgical table watching the doctors work to save his life. Her presence violated every protocol, but no one had the courage to ask their queen to leave. Later, Jake would learn that she'd stood there for 6 hours refusing to move until the doctors confirmed he would survive. When he woke up 3 days later, she was sitting beside his bed. Her royal robes were wrinkled. Her hair was loose. She looked exhausted. "You're an idiot," she said softly. "A brave, selfless, infuriating idiot. Comes with being human," he replied. His voice was weak, but he managed to smile. "I can't do this anymore." She took his hand carefully, mindful of the medical equipment attached to him. "I can't send you into battle and watch you nearly die. I can't keep pretending I don't care if you live or die. I can't keep choosing between my duty and my heart. So choose duty," Jake said. "I understand. That's just it. I've chosen duty my entire life. I've sacrificed everything personal for the good of the Empire. And where has it gotten us? War, conspiracy, nearly being overthrown by people who claim to serve me." She looked directly at him. "You were right that day. The old ways need to change, and I'm tired of pretending I'm not in love with you." Jake's heart, already working overtime to heal his body, somehow beat even faster. "Your court will never accept it. Then they'll have to adapt. I'm tired of living for them. I want to live for myself, even if it's just for a little while. The war isn't over. Theron is still out there. I know, but when it is over, when we've won, I want you to stay. Not as my guard, not as an assignment. As my partner, my equal, my chosen companion. You're asking a human to be consort to a Viridian queen? I'm asking Jake Morrison to be with Zarathi. Everything else is just details we'll figure out together." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "Then yes. When the war is over, yes." News of Jake's injury and the Queen's vigil spread through the Empire. The story touched something in people. Here was their queen, powerful and proud, showing vulnerability for someone she cared about. Here was a human who'd risked everything for their people, asking nothing in return. Public opinion began to shift. Not everywhere, not everyone, but enough to matter. Younger Viridians especially embraced the relationship, seeing it as a symbol of the new empire Zarathi was trying to build. An empire based on merit and character rather than tradition and species. But before they could celebrate, before they could plan for a future together, they had to end the war. And that meant finding Duke Theron. Intelligence reports finally located him. He was hiding on a Kryn military station, planning the next wave of attacks. The station was heavily defended, nearly impossible to assault directly. "Then we don't assault it directly," Jake said when he heard the news. He was out of the medical bay now, mostly healed but still wearing support equipment. "We use a small team. Get in quiet, capture Theron, get out before they know we're there." "That's insane," an admiral said. "The risk is too high." "The risk of letting him continue is higher," Zarathi said. "Assemble your team, Jake, but be careful. I didn't just get you back to lose you again." Jake put together a team of 5. Himself, Commander Kyle, 2 of his best hybrid unit soldiers, and, surprisingly, Lady Mira. The scientist had been training in combat, claiming she was tired of being safe while others fought her battles. The mission was everything Jake had said. Quiet insertion, careful movement through the station, precise strikes against guards. They found Theron in a command center, working with Kryn military leaders. The fight was brief but intense. Jake took Theron down personally, finally ending the threat that had haunted them for months. The team extracted successfully, though Kale took a minor wound covering their escape. Back on the Sovereign Dawn, Theron faced trial. This time there would be no escape. The evidence was overwhelming, his crimes undeniable. The sentence was exile to a prison colony, isolated and powerless. As the guards led him away, Theron looked at Jake one last time. "You've won," he said. "But it won't last. She's a queen. You're nothing." "Wrong," Jake said quietly. "I'm human, and we never give up." The war ended not with a dramatic final battle, but with negotiations. The Kryn Collective, seeing their ally captured and the Viridian military adapting to new tactics, agreed to a ceasefire. Treaties were signed. Borders were redrawn. Peace, fragile but real, settled across the sector. Jake should have been celebrating. Instead, he stood in his quarters on the Sovereign Dawn, staring at a message from Earth. His sister Carrie had sent it 2 days ago. Their father was dying. He'd known this day would come. His father was 78 years old, had lived a good life, worked hard, raised his children well, but knowing didn't make it easier. Jake hadn't seen his father in almost 5 years. 5 years spent protecting an alien queen, fighting alien wars, falling in love across species lines. And now his father was dying, and Jake was light years away. There was a knock on the door. Jake didn't need to ask who it was. Only one person knocked instead of using the intercom. "Come in." Zarathi entered, her formal robes replaced by simpler clothing. She'd been doing that more often lately, shedding the royal image when they were alone together. She took one look at his face and understood immediately. "Your family?" "My father. He's sick. Carrie says he has maybe a month left, possibly less." Zarathi crossed to him and took his hands in hers. "Then you need to go. The treaty negotiations aren't finished. There's still resistance in the outer colonies. You need me here." "I need you to be at peace," she said firmly. "I need you to not carry regret and guilt for the rest of your life. Go home, Jake. Be with your father. Be with your family. And us? We'll figure that out when you return, if you return." That last part hung between them, because they both knew this was the real choice. Earth or the Viridian Empire, his old life or his new one, his family or the woman he loved. "I love you," Jake said. It was the first time he'd said it directly, without qualifications or contexts. "I need you to know that before I go." "I know. I've known for a long time." She kissed him gently. "Go home. Honor your father. Then decide what you truly want." The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks on a fast courier ship. Jake spent the time thinking about everything that had happened. 5 years ago, he'd been a simple security guard with a simple life. Now he was something else. A bridge between species, a warrior, a man in love with someone impossible. Earth looked smaller than he remembered. The orbital stations seemed primitive compared to Viridian technology. The cities looked crowded and chaotic. But it was home, and seeing it brought tears to his eyes that he didn't bother to hide. Carrie met him at the spaceport. She looked older, tired from caring for their father. But when she saw Jake, her face lit up with joy. They hugged for a long time, not needing words. "He's been waiting for you," she said. "He made me promise to keep him alive until you got home." Their father lived in a small house outside the city, the same house Jake had grown up in. It looked exactly the same, like the universe had changed everywhere except here. His father was in bed, thinner than Jake remembered, but still alert. His eyes focused on Jake immediately, and he smiled. "There's my boy, looking good in that alien uniform." Jake sat beside the bed, taking his father's hand. It felt fragile, like it might break. "Hey, Dad, sorry it took me so long. You were busy saving the galaxy. I saw the news reports. My son, the alien queen's champion." His father laughed, which turned into a cough. Your mother would have been so proud, so confused but proud. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing, about Jake's life in the Empire, the battles he'd fought, the friends he'd made, about Zarathi, though Jake tried to avoid too many details. His father saw through it immediately. You love her. Is it that obvious? Son, I was married for 40 years. I know what love looks like. Question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. She's a queen. I'm just a guy from Earth. How does that even work? His father was quiet for a moment. Your mother and I were from different worlds too. Not literally, but close enough. Different families, different backgrounds, different everything. Everyone said it wouldn't work. But we made it work because we chose each other every day. That's what love is, Jake. Not the big dramatic moments. The daily choice to stay, to try, to build something together. She's alien, Dad. Different species, different life expectancy, different everything. And yet you love her. And she loves you, if half of what I've read is true. Everything else is just logistics. Jake stayed with his father for 3 weeks. They were good weeks, painful but good. His father shared stories, advice, regrets, and hopes. Jake listened to all of it, storing every word in his memory. On the last day, his father called Jake to his bedside one final time. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice weak. Everything you've done, everything you've become. But most of all, I'm proud that you followed your heart. Too many people don't. They let fear or duty or other people's opinions make their choices for them. You didn't. You chose love even when it was impossible. That takes real courage. I learned it from you. Then I did something right. His father squeezed Jake's hand with what little strength he had left. Go back to her, Jake. Build that impossible life. Make it work. And be happy. That's all any parent really wants for their children. His father died that night, peacefully in his sleep. Jake and Carrie were both there, holding his hands. The funeral was simple, the way his father had wanted. Friends and family came to pay respects. Several of them asked Jake about his life in space, about the aliens, about the war. He answered their questions but kept the most important parts private. Some things were too precious to share with people who wouldn't understand. After the funeral, Jake stayed for another week to help Carrie settle their father's affairs. The house would go to her. Most of the belongings, too. Jake took only a few things. Photos, his father's watch, a book of notes his father had kept. On his last night on Earth, Carrie cornered him. You're going back to her, aren't you? Is it that obvious? Little brother, you've been staring at the stars every night like a lovesick teenager. Yes, it's obvious. She hugged him. I'm happy for you. Dad was right. You need to follow your heart even if it takes you away from Earth, from me. I'll visit. And you can visit me. The Viridians have opened up more travel between our worlds. I know. I've already started planning my trip. I want to meet this queen who stole my brother's heart. The journey back to Viridian space felt longer than the journey home. Jake spent it writing a message to Zarathi, trying to put his feelings into words. It was harder than fighting battles. Words had never been his strength. Finally, he settled on something simple. I choose you. I choose us. I choose to build an impossible life together and make it work through daily effort and love. If you'll still have me. Her response came before he'd even docked with the Sovereign Dawn. Always. The next few months were busy with arrangements. Jake's role was formally changed from guard to ambassador, representing human interests in the Viridian court. It was a real position with real responsibilities, not just a title to justify his presence. Earth's government approved. They were smart enough to see the value of having someone close to the Viridian queen, someone who understood both cultures. Princess Victoria, now Earth's diplomatic minister, sent a personal message congratulating Jake and thanking him for everything he'd done. The wedding was a massive event, combining human and Viridian traditions in ways that sometimes worked and sometimes created interesting disasters. Jake wore his formal guard uniform with Earth military honors. Zarathi wore robes of pure white that seemed to glow with inner light. The ceremony was performed in both languages, with officials from both worlds presiding. Commander Kale stood as Jake's best man, a role that amused both of them considering how they'd started. Lady Mira organized the whole event with the precision of a military campaign. Carrie traveled from Earth and cried through the entire ceremony. The wedding was attended by thousands, nobles from across the Viridian Empire, diplomats from dozens of species, humans from Earth's government. Not everyone approved. Some nobles still viewed the marriage as a mistake, a scandal, but they came anyway because refusing would have been an even bigger scandal. After the ceremony, as Jake and Zarathi stood before the crowd, Jake thought about his father's words. About choosing love every day, about making impossible things work through effort and commitment. "What are you thinking?" Zarathi asked quietly, for his ears only. "That this is going to be hard. That people will judge us. That there will be challenges we can't even imagine yet." "Yes to all of that." "Are you scared?" "Terrified," Jake admitted. "But I wouldn't change anything." "Good, because I won't let you go now." They settled into their new life together. It wasn't always easy. The cultural differences created misunderstandings. The political pressures never really went away. Jake's human lifespan, shorter than Zarathi's, was something they both worried about but didn't discuss. But they made it work. Jake established a training program that brought human and Viridian soldiers together, teaching each group to learn from the other. The hybrid units became a permanent part of the military, proving their worth again and again. Zarathi pushed through reforms in the Empire, slowly changing ancient laws and traditions, not all at once but gradually. She had time now with Jake to support her. Trade between Earth and the Viridian Empire flourished. Cultural exchanges became common. Humans started appearing in Viridian cities, and Viridians visited Earth as tourists and students. The impossible alliance became normal, everyday reality. 5 years after the wedding, Jake and Zarathi hosted an anniversary celebration. The Sovereign Dawn was filled with guests from across the galaxy. Humans, Viridians, even some Kryn who had embraced the peace treaties. Carrie attended, bringing her new husband, a Viridian scientist she'd met during one of her visits. Jake had given them so much grief about it that Carrie had threatened to tell embarrassing childhood stories to Zarathi. He'd stopped teasing immediately. Commander Kale was there with his family, his children fascinated by the human guests. Lady Mira had been promoted to Chief Science Advisor, a position that gave her influence to push for more progressive policies. Princess Victoria came from Earth with a delegation. She pulled Jake aside during the party. "You did good," she said. "Back on Convergence Point, when you saved my life and caught a queen's attention, I wondered if it would work out. Looks like it has." "We're making it work," Jake corrected. "Every day we make the choice to make it work. That's all any relationship is, really. Royal or not, human or alien." She raised her glass. "To making impossible things possible." Later that night, after the guests had left and the ship was quiet, Jake and Zarathi stood in their private quarters looking out at the stars. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Zarathi asked. Tomorrow they were traveling to a distant sector where a new threat was emerging. Reports of raiders attacking border colonies. Tensions rising between species, the usual problems that needed attention. "A little," Jake admitted. "But we've handled worse." "We have." She leaned against him and he put his arm around her. They fit together perfectly now, having learned each other's rhythms over years of partnership. "Do you ever regret it? Giving up your old life for this?" Jake thought about his father's words. About following your heart. About making daily choices. About building impossible lives through love and effort. "Not for a second," he said. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Good," Zarathi smiled. "Because I'm still not letting you go." "Wouldn't dream of it, my queen." "Just Zarathi," she corrected gently. "When we're alone, I'm just Zarathi." "Fine, not letting you go, Zarathi." She kissed him, and for a moment the whole universe was just the two of them. A human and an alien, a guard and a queen, two impossible people who had built an impossible life together and made it work through daily choice and endless love. Outside the window, the stars wheeled past, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere out there, new threats were forming. New challenges waited. But Jake Morrison, who had once been just a simple security guard protecting a princess, was ready for whatever came next. Because he had something worth fighting for, something worth choosing every single day. He had home. Not a place, but a person. Not Earth or the Viridian Empire, but the woman standing beside him looking at the stars. And that was enough. That was everything.